Zagan was a powerful, rich wizard who is lonely due to being holeless. However, everything changes when he falls in love with a hot elf slave and spends his entire fortune buying her, just so he can rizz her up to be his wife. It all starts on the day a freaky wizard called the Face Stealer is about to do the dirty on an innocent girl, right outside Zagan's castle. But Zagan refuses to let this video get demonetized and saves the girl by crushing the creepy wizard's head, accidentally splurting blood on the girl's face. Traumatized, the girl collapses out of shock, and Zagan realizes that he messed up, so he casts a spell to reverse the incident and clean up the mess before transporting the girl somewhere safe. Just then, a fellow wizard named Barbados pops up to inform Zagan that one of the legendary archdemons is dead. Hearing this, Zagan is shocked, knowing that a spot is open among the archdemons, and sees a chance for him to get even stronger by becoming one. Barbados then adds that his treasures and legacy are now going to be auctioned, so the two of them head to where the auction is. When they are inside, they spot other wizards who are looking to take over the vacant spot, but everyone there knows Zagan is an extremely powerful threat. Just then, the host starts the auction with a bang and presents the late archdemon's most prized treasure in the form of a silver-haired elf named Nephelia. Her unmatched beauty instantly makes Zagan fall in love, and he suddenly bids all of his savings to buy her. Then, Zagan leaps forward to claim his purchase, knowing no one there can go band for band with him in wealth. Being face-to-face with Nephelia, Zagan doesn't know what to say due to being holeless all his life, but he notices the chain around her neck. The host explains it seals her tremendous powers, and no one present knows how to remove it. Afterwards, Zagan takes Nephelia to his castle, and he struggles to start a conversation. But then, Nephelia speaks and asks how he's planning to take her life. This shocks him, so Zagan introduces himself as a wizard uninterested in sacrifices to calm her down, but she returns the favor by informing him that she hasn't cracked anyone, ensuring that she remains pure for his inhumane experiments. Zagan immediately stops her from continuing, reassuring her that he has no intention of using her for his experiments. Confused, Nephelia asks why he bought her in the first place, and Zagan goes quiet, not being able to reveal that he is in love with her, so he deflects, saying she doesn't need to know. Instead, he tells her it's time to choose her room, and Nephelia says she's fine anywhere, as long as she doesn't die as a sacrifice. Hearing that hits Zagan hard, and he realizes she's lived her entire life as a slave who never knew comfort, similar to his upbringing as a street orphan struggling to survive. So Zagan tells her that he bought her because he needs her, and that she must live for him. Afterwards, she takes her to her bedroom, which is on top of a tower, and on the way up, Nephelia nearly falls, but Zagan catches her and creates a scenario, almost like a Korean drama. He then keeps holding her hand as they go up, while trying not to bust to how soft her hand is. When they finally reach the top, he opens the door and is greeted by torture devices. Realizing that it was once a torture chamber, Zagan quickly destroys all the equipment and invites her inside. While Zagan thinks the room is grim and horrible, Nephelia notices the beautiful moon shining on it from the balcony and accepts it. When he asks why, she says that it's because he picked it for her, which she's grateful for. That makes Zagan blush, and when she asks why, he says that it's been some time since he made someone thankful. The following morning, with Nephelia's room still not have a bed or furniture, Zagan allows her to sleep beside his throne during the night. While she rests peacefully near him, he spends the entire night wide awake, unable to calm himself with the girl he secretly loves sleeping so close. No matter how hard he tries to suppress his thoughts, he can't relax, so he searches for something to eat just to clear his head. Later, Zagan returns carrying beef jerky for breakfast, and Nephelia is surprised that he's eating the exact same food as her. But to Zagan, it's nothing but the cheap cut of meat he's been used to since growing up with nothing. Wanting to fulfill her role properly, Nephelia insists on preparing meals for him, and the thought of eating food cooked by the girl he likes feels like a dream come true, so Zagan immediately agrees. Then, they head out to buy ingredients, and Zagan tries stopping a merchant wagon for a ride. But when the merchant asks for payment, he suddenly remembers he spent his entire fortune purchasing Nephelia and now has almost no money left. Refusing to embarrass himself, he claims walking is healthier anyway, and while he does consider robbing the merchant, he quickly abandons it after imagining Nephelia's reaction. Suddenly, a group of bandits attacks the merchant wagon, and Zagan initially wants to ignore it, but when he notices Nephelia trembling, he assumes she has bad memories involving bandits. Wanting to reassure her, he charges the attackers with lightning magic, and when one charges him directly, Zagan catches the man's axe bare-handed, shatters it, and sends him flying with a flick. The bandits call for their leader, another wizard, who seems confused to see someone like Zagan helping ordinary people. Confident in his magic, the leader creates a blazing ring of fire, only for Zagan to seize control of it and use it against him, crushing the entire group. Terrified, the bandits retreat. The merchants are stunned and shower Zagan with gratitude, shocked that a wizard would save them. Their cat-like merchant leader rewards him with a pouch of silver coins and even offers him paid work as a bodyguard until they reach the city. Zagan can hardly believe people would pay this much just for beating up bandits, but what surprises him more is being sincerely appreciated for once. As they continue traveling together, Nephelia asks why he bothered helping them. Zagan sees this as the perfect chance to sound cool and kind in front of her, but instead blurts out that those weaklings simply needed reminding of their place. He immediately regrets how cruel that sounds. Once they arrive in the city, Zagan notices how awkward Nephelia looks in her crusty, old dress and decides to buy her something better. He brings her to a tailor's shop run by a woman with wings named Manuela. The moment Zagan enters, Manuela immediately identifies him as a wizard, and one glance at Nephelia's collar tells her everything. She leads Nephelia into the changing room, assuming she's meant to be some kind of prized possession, and makes Nephelia wear a succubus-style outfit, nearly causing Zagan to paint his pants white. Flustered, he demands something else, and Manuela protests, insisting it suits Nephelia perfectly. But after seeing Nephelia's bright red face, Zagan firmly asks for something more respectable. Eventually, Nephelia changes into a maid outfit paired with enchanted boots, designed to soothe her feet whenever she gets tired. Before they leave, Manuela tells Nephelia she's fortunate to have a master who cares for her so much, leaving Nephelia touched. Then, they visit the blacksmith, where Zagan asks if the man can remove the collar from Nephelia's neck. However, the blacksmith refuses, warning that the collar is protected by magic, and if handled incorrectly, it could trigger a trap and finish her instantly, with the safest solution being to use the original key. Zagan realizes that it's an issue, considering that the key belongs to her former owner, Marcocius, the now deceased Dark Lord. Even though the visit is unsuccessful, Zagan still offers payment for the information, but the blacksmith stops him, reminding Zagan that he once saved his life during an attack years ago. Feeling ashamed for never properly thanking him, he takes this chance to apologize. Zagan barely even remembers the incident, but the blacksmith warmly tells him to visit anytime he needs help. Leaving the shop, Zagan is baffled by how friendly everyone in town suddenly is, while the blacksmith reflects on how much Zagan has changed ever since Nephelia entered his life. That night, Zagan decides it would be unfair to make Nephelia cook after such a long day, so he brings her to a tavern and orders them a proper meal. There, Nephelia quietly asks whether he's afraid she might run away if the collar is ever removed, and while it worries him, Zagan still wants her to be free from it. Looking down at her plate, Nephelia becomes emotional and admits this is the first proper meal she's ever had. Hearing that, Zagan reflects on his own difficult childhood and finally understands why he feels drawn to her, with them both being people who know what it means to grow up in hardship and loneliness. He encourages her to eat, but Nephelia struggles awkwardly with a fork and becomes embarrassed. She eventually switches to a spoon and tastes a cherry tomato for the first time, amazed by how delicious it is. Moments later, Zagan also embarrassingly fails at using a fork. Seeing this, Nephelia offers him a tomato from the same spoon she just used. Realizing the indirect intimacy of the gesture, Zagan freezes and blushes as he accepts it. Nephelia then tells him that since he's never once treated her like a servant or given her orders, she wants to help him willingly, even without being told. Zagan accepts, and in return, he feeds her as well, leaving both of them blushing intensely. When nearby customers begin openly calling them an adorable couple, the two become flustered and quickly leave the place. Meanwhile, the red-haired girl who Zagan saved at the start turns out to be a captain of the Holy Templars, Chastile. Remembering what happened, Chastile remains deeply unsettled by the encounter, unable to understand why a wizard like Zagan would save her. She recalls the cruelty of the enemy wizard she fought and the unexpected kindness of the one who rescued her instead. Thinking back on Zagan's piercing eyes, she senses a loneliness hidden behind them. While lost in thought, she is approached by the high priest, who informs her that her mission is not over, and after searching the lair of the dead wizard, the church now suspects Zagan is responsible for the string of kidnappings that have been happening lately. Chastile immediately rejects the accusation, insisting a wizard like Zagan could not be behind it. The high priest dismisses her objection, arguing that whether or not Zagan is guilty, he remains a wizard, meaning that he's an enemy of the church. Refusing to accept that conclusion, Chastile decides to investigate personally and prove Zagan's innocence. The next morning, Zagan dreams of his past and relives the moment he nearly dies at the hands of a powerful sorcerer, only to survive by somehow stealing his magic. But then, he wakes up to Nephelia calling for him and greeting him good morning, and when says it back, he blushes while saying it. He then heads to the dining hall, and sees that the once messy room is now completely spotless, and Nephelia has even made breakfast. It surprises Zagan to see the transformation his home has undergone, and he notices Nephelia's long ears twitching, which he realizes is a sign that she's happy. Then, to his confusion, he notices that there's only one plate and one chair prepared. When he asks why, Nephelia explains that she only made food for him. Refusing to let this slide, Zagan insists she join him, blurting out that she can sit on his lap while they eat. The moment he says it, he turns bright red, immediately regretting how creepy that sounds. However, after a shy moment, Nephelia agrees, and she carefully sits on his lap, while Zagan tries his best not to get a stiffy. They share breakfast together, even feeding one another as they eat, to which they both enjoy. Days later, Zagan spends time reading in his library when Nephelia asks him about magic circles and runes. She admits she has never been able to properly cast spells, which confuses Zagan, considering she has the magical energy enough to flatten the whole Naruto franchise. To him, it's like seeing someone with a massive willy but with no clue how to crack a baddie. So he begins teaching her, and during the lesson, Nephelia asks him why he became so obsessed with gaining power. The question catches him off guard, since he has never really put that desire into words before. After a moment of silence, he gives a simple answer, which is that he simply wants to survive. He then recalls his childhood, when he lived alone on the streets, surviving off theft and scraps. Eventually, a wizard kidnapped several homeless people and used them as experimental subjects. Zagan only escaped death by stealing that wizard's power, and ever since then, he swore never to be weak enough to be helpless again. After hearing his story, Nephelia quietly says she has no desire to become strong, and Zagan is about to tell her something when he suddenly senses intruders entering his domain. Outside, Chastille and several Templars have arrived to investigate the recent kidnappings and determine whether Zagan is involved. Chastille draws her holy blade and manages to damage Zagan's protective barrier. When Zagan appears before them, he immediately recognizes her as the red-haired knight he rescued before. This time, however, he has no intention of simply letting her leave. He orders them to turn back, but they refuse, leaving him no choice but to fight. Zagan quickly attacks the group, striking one Templar in the stomach and launching him into another. A blonde knight rushes forward next, only for Zagan to casually cut through his weapon, knock him aside, and pin him to the ground. Rather than chopping their heads, Zagan declares that he will spare their lives so they can spread news of his strength instead. Chastille immediately calls him out, accusing him of only saying that because he doesn't want Nephelia to witness bloodshed. Angered, she attacks him seriously, but still, Zagan refuses to seriously hurt her. She lashes out, accusing him of relying on magic to preserve his pride, but Zagan snaps back, asking how she can condemn magic while using holy power to oppress others, knowing that for people like him, magic is not a luxury, it is survival. His words momentarily shake her, but she quickly pushes forward with her assault. As their battle intensifies, Zagan catches her holy sword with both hands, tearing through his gloves in the process. Backed against a tree, he braces as her blade slices through the trunk, only managing to stop the strike just before it reaches him. In that moment, Chastille quietly tells him to pretend to lose. She warns him that the church has already marked him, and if he survives today, stronger Templars will eventually be sent after him. Zagan is caught off guard, and Chastille admits she still remembers the mercy in his eyes when he spared her life and cannot forget what he did for her. Zagan knows that protecting a wizard is an unforgivable offense for someone in her position, making her sincerity all the more surprising. For a moment, Zagan genuinely considers her advice, but his thoughts immediately go to Nephelia and what the church would do to her. Right then, Nephelia steps outside the castle. One of the Templars mistakes her for a threat and hurls a spear in her direction. Zagan reacts instantly, shoving her out of harm's way, but the spear pierces through his hand instead. Seeing him injured triggers something inside Nephelia. Her emotions overflow, and her power erupts. She commands the surrounding forest itself, causing branches and vines to lash out and restrain the Templar responsible. Zagan rushes over and embraces her tightly, calming her until she regains control of herself, while Chastille and the remaining Templars retreat. Later, as Nephelia bandages his injured hand, Zagan asks about the power she used. While a bit hesitant, she reveals that her magic is enchantment. Zagan is stunned, having always believed enchantment belonged more to myth than reality, as unlike his magic, enchantment directly influences nature itself through pure will. Nephelia explains that her people feared this gift and treated it as a curse. When her village came under attack, they sold her away to protect themselves, but even after that, the city continued hunting her. At one point, she even found comfort in the idea of dying, convincing herself it was somehow what she deserved. Eventually, she realized how disturbing that mindset was and buried those feelings deep inside. She apologizes, believing she has failed to be the kind, gentle person others wanted her to be. But Zagan tells her that if he had gone through what she did, he probably would have destroyed the entire village himself. In his eyes, the people who abandoned her were already rotten to begin with. Rather than suppressing her power, he tells her she should embrace it. He then remembers a girl from his own past who once scolded him for valuing strength above all else. When he mocked her weakness, she angrily told him that even weak people deserve to live, and that power alone doesn't justify anything. Though Zagan dismissed her at the time, her words clearly stayed with him. Even now, he still believes kindness without caution can become dangerous, which is why he chose strength. But kneeling before Nephelia, he gently places a hand on her cheek and tells her to stop hiding who she truly is. At last, Nephelia can no longer hold back. Overwhelmed by emotion, she breaks down crying quietly as Zagan holds her close. Afterward, Nephelia apologizes for letting him see her cry, but Zagan brushes it off, saying that it's the most he has ever heard her talk at once. That makes her blush harder, so she quickly changes the topic by asking about his injured hand. Zagan realizes he doesn't feel any pain, and when he removes the bandages, he's surprised to find the wound completely healed. He figures that touching Nephelia must have triggered her enchantment to heal him, so he thanks her. That night, while Zagan is preparing to sleep on his throne, Nephelia pops up and asks if he would like to sleep with her. That sends Zagan's imagination to go nuts like she's about to make him nut his white cream. But his thoughts are crushed when Nephelia explains that she only means sharing the bed, since he always sleeps sitting on the throne. Realizing how sincere her suggestion is, Zagan insists he's perfectly comfortable where he is, claiming the throne is his prized possession. Hearing that excuse, Nephelia sits down in front of him and quietly offers her lap as a pillow. Faced with an offer even the godfather can't refuse, Zagan gathers himself and carefully rests his head on her lap. With soft thighs as pillows, he is aware of just how comfortable it is, and looking up at her face only makes things worse for his white shooters. Then, Zagan asks why she's suddenly being so kind to him, and Nephelia explains that she wants to thank him for giving her a place to stay and for allowing her to use her own power without fear. As he listens, Zagan gently reaches up, touches her cheek, and asks whether she wants to explore her abilities more seriously. Nephelia hesitates, doubting whether she's truly capable of such a thing, but Zagan reassures her, telling her with complete certainty that she may one day surpass even him. With that encouragement, Nephelia agrees to train so she can become stronger and support him. After a while, Nephelia brings up his story about the girl who once called him a bad person. She says that even though he pretends otherwise, she knows those words must have hurt him. Then, she gently cradles his head closer and promises she will never forget the kindness he has shown her. For a brief moment, Zagan feels something unfamiliar and deeply comforting, even having to hide a small tear, wishing the peaceful warmth of that moment could last forever. The next day, Barbados visits Zagan to ask him about the Templar attack in the night, who wielded a holy sword, and Zagan admits Chastile was surprisingly strong, which only makes Barbados laugh. But then, when his eyes land on Nephelia, he is in disbelief, immediately asking why this test rabbit is still alive. Zagan explains that he doesn't use people's lives for magic, and then introduces Nephelia as his apprentice. For a moment, Barbados pauses to think about it and then praises the idea, remarking that Nephelia could become an incredibly valuable asset. When he asks if her power was what drove off the Templars, Zagan confirms it. Barbados then asks if Zagan intends to pursue the vacant throne left by Macrosius, and Zagan admits the idea has crossed his mind, mostly because he wants to ensure Nephelia's safety. However, he knows his 10 years of experience pale in comparison to witches who have spent centuries honing their craft. Even so, as long as he's alive, he intends to keep climbing higher. Watching the way Zagan acts around Nephelia, Barbados is disgusted to see his homie turn into a limp willy simp and leaves. Zagan is confused by his behavior, while Nephelia comments that Barbados seems like an important friend to him. The word friend lingers strangely in Zagan's mind, as it's a concept he has never seriously applied to himself before. Pushing the thought aside, he decides it's time to begin Nephelia's training for real. From then on, Nephelia balances studying magic while helping around the castle. Little by little, she becomes more expressive, and while controlling enchantment remains difficult, her skill with magic circles steadily improves each day. Eventually, a formal invitation arrives from the 12 Dark Lords, summoning Zagan to the Great Hall. On the appointed day, Zagon travels a hidden castle where the remaining Dark Lords gather, and whispers spread through the room, as many are surprised that the candidate being considered for the vacant throne is so young. Annoyed, Zagon bluntly tells them to get to the point or he'll leave, and one of the lords announces that Zagon has been selected as the 13th Dark Lord. The lord presents him with the ceremonial mark, explaining that accepting it is necessary to formally claim the title. As Zagon observes it, he feels overwhelming magical power radiating from the emblem, the same presence he senses from each of the other Dark Lords. Curious, he asks why they selected him over others who are more experienced. Another lord explains that while Zagon is undeniably powerful, what truly sets him apart is his ability to survive impossible situations, mentioning how his victory over Andres the Cursed at such a young age is proof. They continue praising his terrifying ability to turn stolen power into his own, which alone makes him a uniquely dangerous force worthy of both respect and fear. As they continue praising his potential, Zagon quietly wonders whether he could simply steal all of their power if he wanted to. There, one woman read his mind and warns him that doing so would cost him far more than it would gain, and that reminder immediately makes him think of Nephelia. They say that to walk the path of a Dark Lord means embracing a life surrounded by darkness alone. But Zagon laughs, as compared to what he endured long before becoming a wizard. This warning means little to him. In his eyes, life has always been as simple as either becoming something feared or being destroyed. So Zagon accepts the title of 13th Dark Lord, but only after placing one condition on his acceptance. Later, he returns to his castle, and Nephelia is in the kitchen preparing dinner. Then, Zagon tells her that with his new status as Dark Lord, he now possesses the authority needed to remove her cursed collar. So Zagon unlocks the restraint around her neck, freeing her completely. But instead of celebrating, he coldly tells Nephelia that now that he holds such power, he has a need for her. Suddenly, Nephelia finds herself alone in a dark alley, clutching the now open collar. Her mind drifts back to the warm castle, the unfinished meal she was preparing, and the comfort she found living by his side. But when she looks down at the broken chain in her hands, it reminds her that Zagon has abandoned him, which leaves her in silence. Later, Chastiel finds Nephelia still in shock, not fully there mentally after what happened. Worried, Chastiel asks if she's okay, but instead of answering normally, Nephelia tells Chastiel she can take her life if she wants, disturbing Chastiel. Their interaction gets attention from the people nearby, and since everyone knows Nephelia was living with Zagon, people assume Chastiel is harassing her because of that. Suddenly, Manuela steps in and protects Nephelia, scolding Chastiel for picking on a defenseless girl. The misunderstanding gets so bad that Chastiel suddenly starts crying from frustration, and even when Nephelia explains that Chastiel did nothing wrong, Chastiel can't stop tearing up. Afterward, the three of them go to a local pub. While crying, Nephelia asks why Zagon threw her away like that, and Manuela gently comforts her until she calms down enough to explain what happened. After hearing the story, Chastiel says it sounds like Zagon was just using her, but Nephelia immediately glares at her with a stare so sharp that knives would be scared, and states that Zagon would never do something like that. Manuela then asks if anything happened before Zagon sent her away, and Nephelia remembers Zagon saying he had become the Dark Lord, and Manuela explains that the city used to be ruled by the 13th Dark Lord, but ever since his death, the area has been filled with problems. Chastiel adds that there have also been a lot of recent kidnappings, and Manuela mentions that a wizard called the Face Stealer was the culprit and is already caught by the church. She then starts complaining about how the church keeps taking money from people through taxes and forced donations, and Chastiel doesn't really know how to defend the church after hearing that. Seeing her silence, Nephelia tells her it's not her fault, and Chastiel gets emotional again, and finally understands why Zagon cared so much about protecting Nephelia. The topic then shifts back to the Dark Lords, and Chastiel explains that the church sees the Dark Lords as symbols of pure evil. There are 12 holy swords made to defeat the 13 Dark Lords, so if a new 13th Lord has appeared, the church will definitely start hunting him. At that moment, Nephelia finally understands why Zagon let her go, and it's not because he was rejecting her, but he was trying to protect her from being dragged into danger. Chastiel then asks if Zagon is actually skilled enough to use forbidden magic, like sacrificing humans for more power. Nephelia quickly says that Zagon would never do that, as he never uses people's lives for his magic. Chastiel agrees, remembering how Zagon had many chances to hurt her but kept holding back. She even says that when she first met him, he looked like someone who was asking for help but was too stubborn to ever say it out loud. Hearing someone else understand Zagon so well makes Nephelia feel a little jealous, but she stands up and says she wants to go back to him. Chastiel agrees and promises to help, and says that she wants to figure out who framed Zagan for all the crimes happening in the city. Manuela smiles warmly, happy to see Nefelia regain her spirit. And when Nefelia asks why she's being so nice, Manuela simply says that's what friends do. Chastille awkwardly says she'd like to be part of that friendship too, and the three girls share this moment with laughter. Suddenly, 3 Templars from Chastille's group rush into the pub, shouting that there's an emergency. But before they can explain, dark shadows spread through the room, claiming that it's from Zagan. In that moment, Nefelia and Chastille are captured by the shadows, while Manuela barely escapes by flying away. Hours later, Zagan captures the 3 Templars for trying to attack him. In his head, he keeps trying to convince himself that sending Nefelia away from wizards in the church is what's best for her. But just as he's about to leave, one of the blonde Templars grabs onto him and begs him to spare Chastille. He insists that Chastille has been defending Zagan this whole time, even arguing with the High Priest to prove he isn't guilty. His words confuse Zagan, but before he gets to ask more, Manuela suddenly bursts in and tells him Nefelia and Chastille have both been kidnapped. Hearing that, Zagan clenches his fists, torn over what to do. He knows that if he goes after them, the church will definitely learn about his connection to Nefelia and label her an enemy too. But before he can keep overthinking, Manuela yells at him. She tells him Nefelia truly wants to stay by his side, and asks how he can be so cold after everything. Her words hit him hard, realizing that even after he pushed her to the streets, Nefelia still chose him, and that thought clears his mind immediately. Zagan admits that maybe magic users really are selfish, including himself, so he selfishly claims that Nefelia is important to him, and he refuses to let anyone take her away from him. With his mind made up, Zagan stands up, his eyes full of determination. Manuela joins him, along with the 3 Templars, all ready to rescue Nefelia and Chastille. When asked if he knows who did this, Zagan quietly says he has a pretty good guess. Meanwhile, deep inside a cave, Nefelia wakes up chained next to Chastille, both chained with cursed chains that block their powers. Then, from the darkness, the real culprit, Barbados, walks out. Nefelia stares at him in disbelief and asks why he's doing this, especially since she thought he was Zagan's friend. Barbados just laughs and says he never saw Zagan as a friend. He reveals that Andras, the first wizard Zagan defeated, was actually his master. In Barbados' mind, everything Zagan has now, from his power, his knowledge, and the hot and creamy elf he gets to sleep with every night, should have belonged to Barbados. He admits he was behind the kidnappings and used another wizard to commit crimes under Zagan's name to frame him. But his plan got messy and things spiraled out of control. Chastille angrily calls him a monster, but Barbados doesn't care, saying that sacrifices are necessary if you want power, especially when his goal is to prove himself worthy of becoming one of the Dark Lords. But Nefelia glares at him and tells him Zagan has already become the new 13th Dark Lord. Barbados explodes in anger, seeing that Zagan has once again taken something from him, so he drags Nefelia toward a glowing magic circle. As the curse pulls at her strength, Nefelia starts thinking this might really be the end. But then she remembers how Zagan was the first person to ever treat her like an actual person instead of a tool. That memory gives her strength. She shouts that she belongs with Zagan and no one else has the right to touch her. Enraged, Barbados raises his hand to hit her. But before he can, the entire cave suddenly explodes, and through the smoke and rubble, Zagan appears. Barbados instantly realizes that Zagan has figured everything out. Annoyed, he asks when Zagan became suspicious of him. Zagan calmly explains that the answer was obvious, with the first clue being the face stealer, who was far too weak to ever get past Zagan's barrier, especially since he panicked, begged for his life, and died so easily. Because of that, Zagan knew the only person bold enough to cross his barrier had to be Barbados. But what confirmed everything was when Barbados casually came to check on him after hearing he had been attacked by a Holy Templar, which was too suspicious. Still, none of that is what truly makes Zagan angry, and what he can't forgive is that Barbados dared to hurt Nefelia. Without wasting another second, Zagan rushes forward and strikes Barbados in the arm and leg, instantly stopping his movement. He then breaks Nefelia's chains and quickly asks if she's okay. But instead of answering, Nefelia asks if he is okay. For the first time, she fully speaks her mind, and she tells him she hated seeing him look so sad and lonely. If he really thought she was no longer needed, she says she would have accepted leaving. But what she couldn't stand was the thought of him being left alone again, as she didn't want to see that lonely expression on his face. Her words hit Zagan hard. Feeling guilty, he pulls Nefelia into his arms and apologizes for pushing her away. Their emotional moment is interrupted when Barbados suddenly creates a huge number of magic circles around them to launch a counterattack. But Zagan stays calm. He reveals that he had already tampered with Barbados's magic energy earlier, making his attack useless. Furious, Barbados accuses Zagan of stealing that technique from his late master, Andras. Zagan immediately corrects him, saying he learned that trick long before defeating Andras. Back then, he could only create magic circles using blood. When Andras tried to use him as a sacrifice, Zagan had already secretly drawn a magic circle on his own hand. Since Andras used the exact same spell, Zagan was able to steal his magic instantly. Filled with rage, Barbados starts summoning every magic circle he can remember. But no matter what he throws out, Zagan casually steals every single one like he's Kakashi in his prime. Zagan explains that his strength was never some lucky accident. He built it through endless effort. He spent years reading every book he could find, studying magic until people started avoiding him because of how obsessed he became. Barbados was the only one who stayed around, which is why Zagan once thought he might actually be a friend. But now he understands that Barbados was never interested in friendship, and he was only curious about what kind of person Zagan really was. So Zagan gives him an answer. Using all the magic he has stolen, he proudly declares himself as the newly crowned Dark Lord, Zagan, the Wizard Slayer. The moment he says it, he unleashes a devastating attack through multiple enhanced magic circles. The explosion of power overwhelms Barbados completely. At that moment, Barbados finally understands the truth that even if he somehow became a Dark Lord, he would still never be able to surpass Zagan. Desperate, he starts apologizing and even tries to bring up their past, acting like they were friends. Zagan slowly walks toward him, his face cold and emotionless. He tells Barbados clearly that they were never friends. Then he raises his fist, charged with magic, but instead of deforming his ugly mug of a face, he smashes the ground and completely scares Barbados. Zagan straightens up and calmly says he has no intention of ending him. Barbados calls him an idiot for showing mercy, but Zagan says he has no interest in following the usual rules of wizards anymore, stating that he plans to do things his own way. Suddenly, the entire cave begins shaking violently. Confused, Zagan asks Barbados what he just did. But Barbados looks just as shocked and says it wasn't him. Zagan quickly realizes that his earlier punch accidentally activated one of Barbados's hidden spells, and Barbados reveals that he had actually been trying to summon a real demon. There, a giant demonic creature begins forming in front of them, and everyone feels the extreme tension. As Zagan looks at it, he can feel the overwhelmingly intoxicating power radiating from the demon. Even he admits to himself that winning against something like this would be nearly impossible. But then, instead of attacking, the fully formed demon suddenly kneels before Zagan. It senses the presence of its new lord and bows to him, shocking everyone in the cave. Even Zagan is confused, but he quickly regains composure and calmly orders the demon to return to where it came from. Surprisingly, it obeys immediately and disappears. With the ritual interrupted, the cave starts collapsing around them. Zagan quickly grabs everyone and leads them out before everything caves in. Outside, the three Templars are waiting anxiously, and they are relieved to see Shasteel safe. Taurus comments that this might be the first time they've walked away from a wizard without anyone dying. Zagan simply sighs and lets them leave. Then, Manuela steps closer and thanks Zagan for saving everyone. Before leaving, she quietly tells him to have an honest conversation with Nephelia this time. As for Barbados, he accepts his defeat and leaves, following Zagan's command. At last, only Zagan and Nephelia are left alone, and the beautiful elf speaks first. With complete honesty, she tells him she wants to stay by his side no matter what happens from now on. In response, he kneels in front of her and says he doesn't want to be called master by her, but instead, he wants something more meaningful between them. Unable to hold back his feelings any longer, he stands up, gently grabs her shoulders, and tells her that from now on, she belongs with him forever. Nephelia smiles warmly and happily accepts his feelings. She even holds up her old chain and says that while it once represented something painful, she now sees it differently. To her, it has become a symbol of where their connection began. Then she asks what they are exactly, and despite having all the power and status, Zagan freezes up like a pathetic virgin, unable to find the right word to describe love. A few days later, Shasteel makes a difficult decision and returns her holy sword to the church. She feels like she no longer deserves to use it, especially now that she wants to help Zagan, someone the church sees as an enemy. The high priest tells her she will still need to face punishment, but according to him, the bigger issue is the sword itself, as holy swords choose their own users. Because of all the work Shasteel has done for the church, The high priest promises to speak up for her and make sure her punishment isn't too harsh. Still, he also warns her that Raphael Hirondelle, one of the strongest Holy Templars, will soon be visiting the city, to which Chastille has a bad feeling that it might have something to do with her. Meanwhile, Zagan spends most of his time in his library, searching for anything related to the Dark Lords and their connection to demons, but no matter how many books he goes through, he can't find any useful answers. While he's busy reading, Nephilia quietly walks into the room, trying to surprise him. But Zagan already senses her, and decides to pretend not to notice anyway, letting her attempt her little sneak attack. However, due to her being as tall as 5 Coke cans, it completely fails, and Nephilia ends up getting embarrassed. She smiles and tells him she's worried he's been overworking himself, while Zagan has to fight for his life internally, just trying to stay calm around how cute she is. Nephilia then reveals that she made lunch for him, and explains that Manuela has been teaching her all kinds of new dishes lately. Then, when they try the food together, both of them are genuinely impressed by how delicious it is. Nephilia also proudly brings out pudding for dessert, and Zagan stares at the pudding, having absolutely no idea how he's supposed to eat it, so Nephilia tells him to just use a spoon. Once he tries his first bite, he's immediately shocked by how good it tastes, another reminder of just how little he actually knows about normal food. But before he can enjoy it for long, a huge crash suddenly shakes the castle and destroys his barrier. Smashing through the walls is a dragon, and it steps inside wearing heavy armor. He introduces himself as Valefor, and he challenges Zagan to a fight. Completely unfazed, Zagan tells him to wait because he wants to finish his pudding first. Unfortunately, Valefor takes this as an insult and attacks him immediately, which annoys Zagan way more than the attack itself, mostly because she ruined his dessert. In response, he instantly blasts her across the room with magic. When Valefor's helmet falls off, Nephilia is shocked to see that the dragon is actually just a girl. The moment Zagan realizes this, he quickly picks her up and carries her to a guest room so she can rest, not wanting to end up like Diddy. Later, Valefor wakes up and immediately tries attacking him again, but Zagan stops her without effort and tells her she should be grateful Nephilia is around, because he would not have been this patient. Valefor asks why he spared her, and Zagan simply answers that it's because of Nephilia. When he asks why she attacked him in the first place, Valefor proudly says she needs to grow stronger. As a dragon, she claims it's her duty to defeat him, especially since he's known as the Wizard Slayer. Zagan can tell that her stubborn determination reminds him a lot of his younger self, so instead of punishing her, he decides to make her help Nephilia with chores for a week. Suddenly, Valefor nervously asks if Zagan plans to eat her, and he is completely horrified by the question and immediately denies it. He admits he might not be a great person, but the idea of eating a dragon is absurd to him. Confused, Nephilia asks why anyone would want to eat a dragon at all, and Zagan explains that dragons are valuable because their body parts contain incredible magical properties, which is why Valefor hides herself under armor. Remembering what it felt like to starve as a child, Zagan decides to offer Valefor food instead. At first, Valefor gets offended and almost throws the food away, but Zagan immediately warns her not to waste anything Nephilia cooked. Faced with that threat, she reluctantly starts eating. However, the moment she tastes it, her attitude completely changes. The food is so good that she quickly finishes everything. After that, Zagan casually returns to the library. Valefor calls him foolish for leaving her alone with Nephilia, but Zagan just tells her to do whatever she wants, fully confident that Valefor couldn't overpower Nephilia anyway. As the day goes on, Valefor ends up helping Nephilia with chores like laundry. She becomes especially impressed by Nephilia's cooking, and quickly decides that Nephilia is now officially her friend. As for Zagan, Valefor admits she finds him confusing, seeing that he has incredible power, yet hides it and treats her with unexpected kindness. She asks Nephilia why she chooses to stay with someone like him. Nephilia smiles and explains that while Zagan technically bought her, he never treated her like property. Instead, he accepted her for who she is and always treated her like a normal person. Hearing that hits Valefor deeply, as it's something she has clearly never experienced before. Over the next few days, Valefor slowly settles into life at the castle. She works hard alongside Nephilia and never complains about any of it. One evening, while Zagan is still searching for information about the true demon lord, Valefor calls him over for dinner. As he sits down, Valefor warns him that one day she might still attack him from behind. Zagan just smiles, slightly reminded of Barbados. He casually tells her she's welcome to try, but if she loses, her chores will double. Then, during dinner, Valefor apologizes for attacking him on her first day there. Seeing that she's finally calming down, Zagan decides he might bring her along next time he visits the Dark Lord's castle. But this suddenly makes Valefor upset. She asks why he trusts her so easily when she's a dragon. Zagan simply replies that he doesn't care what species she is. In his home, she's just a girl, and she's free to act like one. Those words completely catch Valefor off guard, and she suddenly starts crying. Zagan awkwardly pats her on the head and tells her not to cry into Nephelia's food. Valefor nods and says that from now on, he can be her friend too. Later that night, Valefor falls asleep while still holding onto her spoon. When Zagan tries to gently take it away, she accidentally grabs onto his finger instead and mumbles something about her father in her sleep. Nephelia watches the scene quietly before smiling and casually commenting that the two of them kind of look like parents with a child. Both Zagan and Nephelia immediately turn bright red, but without saying a word, they quietly reach over and hold each other's hands. Days later, Valefor starts a small journal of her experience living in Zagan's castle. In it, she writes down everything she learns, from cleaning to cooking. But what interests her even more than chores is watching Zagan and Nephelia. One day, she catches Nephelia quietly staring at Zagan, while he's asleep, softly talking to herself like she's trying to practice saying something important to him. Another time, Valefor walks into the library and finds Nephelia sitting on Zagan's lap while they study together. But the moment they notice her, the two awkwardly separate like nothing happened. Even though she doesn't fully understand what's going on between them, Valefor can't help feeling warm and comfortable living in the castle. Sometime later, Zagan and Nephelia bring Valefor to Manuela's shop. There, they buy her a cute new coat, which immediately makes Valefor happy. Afterward, while walking through the market, Valefor happily holds both Zagan's and Nephelia's hands, looking exactly like a child walking with her parents. Seeing this makes Zagan feel strangely protective of her. Nearby, Shastiel is also walking through the market, thinking about how she gave back all her equipments after choosing to defend Zagan. Deep down, she still believes Zagan is a good person, and she doesn't want him and Nephelia to be separated, especially since the two of them together already feel like a little family. In that moment, she suddenly spots the real Zagan and Nephelia walking toward her, with a daughter between them. Shastiel freezes in pure shock and genuinely thinks that these two have gone full freaky deaky and crack, which resulted in a daughter. Seeing her reaction, Zagan quickly introduces Valefor properly and tells her that Shastiel is a friend. Before the awkward moment can fully settle, 3 Templars suddenly appear and approach Shastiel. They inform her that the High Priest is demanding her presence immediately. Valefor is ready to jump in and fight, but Zagan quickly stops her. He reminds her that causing trouble here would only hurt innocent people, especially the ones Nephelia cares about. Reluctantly, Valefor calms down. Later, Zagan brings Nephelia and Valefor to the former Dark Lord's castle. The moment they enter, Valefor immediately senses a familiar presence, like dragon energy left behind in the castle. So Zagan tells her to investigate anything connected to dragons while they search the area. As they explore, they come across an old golem that once protected the castle. But ever since Marchosius died, the golem has been completely inactive. Not long after, Valefor discovers a magic circle containing traces of dragon power. Proud of her discovery, she shows it to Zagan, who pats her head for discovering it, followed by Nephelia, who joins in. Valefor enjoys the praise, but Zagan suddenly notices Nephelia quietly blushing nearby. After a moment, he realizes she also wants a head pat, so he pats her head, and her ears twitch happily. After that, Valefor uses the magic circle to open a hidden door, and beyond it is a secret passage leading underground. The group carefully heads down into a hidden dungeon. At the bottom, they discover a secret library. Zagan tells Nephelia and Valefor to help search for books related to demons, and while looking through books, Valefor suddenly asks Zagan how he was able to tell Nephelia wanted a head pat earlier. Zagan casually replies that he can usually tell what Nephelia wants because she gives him obvious hints. Valefor quietly says she hopes she can have that kind of connection with someone someday, and Zagan tells her not to worry, as she has plenty of time. He reminds her that Marchosius lived for over 1,000 years, and since she's a dragon, she'll likely live just as long, meaning that she has more than enough time to spend with him and Nephelia. Hearing that, Valefor grabs onto his hand tightly and says she wants to stay with them. A little later, Valefor finds a book about the 12 holy swords, and Zagan quickly starts reading it. As he studies the contents, he notices something strange. The symbols connected to the holy swords look very similar to the mark of a Dark Lord. He theorizes that if the two are connected somehow, then understanding their history might finally reveal the truth behind the Demon Lord. Meanwhile, back at the church, The famous Holy Templar Raphael finally arrives in the city, and Chastile is called to meet him. The moment they meet, Raphael immediately asks how many wizards have died in her hands. Assuming this is some kind of test before punishment, Chastile carefully answers that she doesn't keep count. Raphael suddenly bursts into loud laughter and says that it's been a long time since anyone answered him so directly. But just as quickly, his expression turns cold again. He tells her to save that confidence for the afterlife. Her three fellow knights immediately step forward, ready to defend her if needed. But before blood is spilled, High Priest Clavwell steps in and scolds Raphael for his behavior. Raphael says he doesn't care about anything else and is only here because of Chastile's holy sword. He explains that holy swords choose their owners, meaning no one else can properly wield one while its chosen owner is still alive. Because of that, he bluntly says the simplest solution would be to butcher Chastile. He also tells Clavwell he has no right to keep the sword and should just return it. However, Chastile speaks up. She says that using the holy sword for selfish reasons would make her no different from the kind of people she hates. That surprises Raphael, who also respects her stance. In the end, Clavwell returns the holy sword to Chastile and tells her to trust her own judgment from now on. Even so, Chastile quietly wonders why Raphael is helping her at all. Later that night, Barbados drags Zagan out to a pub as part of their weird agreement after their earlier fight. Since Zagan spared him, Barbados decided that means they can now go drinking together. While drinking, Barbados asks if Zagan laid the pipe, spread his goo, and now has a daughter. Zagan dryly answers that the daughter he's referring to is someone they both know. Confused, Barbados first guesses Valefor, but then pauses and realizes that's actually correct. He bursts out laughing after understanding that Zagan basically adopted a dragon girl. The conversation eventually shifts to Raphael's arrival in town, and Barbados warns Zagan to be careful, saying Raphael is most likely here for him. According to rumors, Raphael once consumed dragon flesh, which gave him incredible power. Hearing that immediately makes Zagan serious. Valefor once mentioned that her father died to a Templar, and now Zagan starts wondering if Raphael could be the same person. Just as Barbados starts getting drunker and louder, the tavern door suddenly opens, and Raphael steps inside. He stands directly behind the two wizards, oozing out tremendous bloodlust. Barbados is ready to attack him immediately, but Zagan stops him. He calmly says that, despite Raphael's scary presence, he doesn't sense any real hostility from him yet. So instead of fighting, Zagan and Raphael sit down together in a quiet corner of the tavern. Raphael explains that he came here because he wanted to meet the wizard who saved Chastile, one of his fellow Templars. Zagan asks if Raphael is really comfortable letting two wizards sit in front of him so casually, and Raphael says that he only destroys threats before they grow too dangerous, comparing them to sparks before they become wildfires. He then asks Zagan if Chastile was ever a worthy opponent, and Zagan admits that Chastile gave him one of the hardest fights he has ever had. Hearing that, Raphael casually says he might have to take her life, and he explains that Chastile's job was originally to eliminate Zagan, but after letting him go, she lost her place as a Templar. In the Church's eyes, that now makes her a risk. Zagan quickly understands Raphael's true reason for coming, which is to check if Zagan and Chastile are truly connected so he can use that information later. Zagan warns him not to try anything reckless. He reminds Raphael that Chastile is loved by the people in town, and more importantly, this city is under his protection. Raphael simply laughs, clearly entertained. He says Zagan is exactly the kind of person he expected before standing up to leave. Once Raphael is gone, Zagan tells Barbados to secretly follow Chastile using his shadow magic. As payment, Zagan offers to let him borrow any book from the library, which is enough to convince Barbados instantly. Later, when Zagan returns home, he finds Nephelia waiting for him, while Valefor is asleep with her head resting on Nephelia's lap. Nephelia explains that this was Valefor's own idea. She worked especially hard today, helping move all of the books from the Dark Castle into their own library. Nephelia then quietly mentions that she knows Valefor recently told Zagan she wants to stay with him for the rest of her life, and she admits she feels a little sad, because she never got the chance to properly say the same thing herself. Zagan gently reassures her, saying she will stay with him, and that simple answer makes Nephelia smile warmly. To her, it sounds like a promise that all three of them will remain together. In the peaceful silence, Zagan slowly leans closer. His hand gently touches Nephelia's face, and for a brief moment, it feels like they are finally about to kiss. But right at the worst possible timing, Barbados suddenly rises out of the shadows. Zagan looks ready to explode from annoyance, and basically threatens him to make this interruption worth it. Barbados quickly says it's urgent, and reveals that he is carrying Shastiel in his arms, unconscious. Barbados explains that she has been poisoned, and Zagan and Nephelia immediately rush over to check on her, which also wakes Valefor up. The moment Valefor notices Shastiel's holy sword, anger instantly fills her up. She activates her dragon arm, preparing to attack, but Zagan quickly stops her. He reminds her that Shastiel is not her enemy, and had nothing to do with her father's death. He tells Valefor that if she truly wants revenge, then she should focus on the real culprit instead of taking it out on the wrong person. Later, Shastiel wakes up in Nephelia's bed, and Zagan is sitting nearby, casually reading a book while keeping watch over her. He explains that she was poisoned and asks her what happened before she collapsed. Shastiel recalls meeting a mysterious man wearing knight armor and hiding his face. The stranger claimed he supported peace between the church and wizards, and he told Shastiel that if she followed him, she would be acting against Clavel's wishes. But the stranger didn't force her to make a choice immediately. Before leaving, he gave her one name to remember, Oribas, saying that it might help keep her safe. Later, when Shastiel returned home, she found tea already waiting for her. After drinking it, she collapsed from poison. Luckily, Barbados arrives soon after. Zagan asks if she suspects anyone, and Shastiel immediately thinks of Raphael. But Zagan has doubts, believing that Raphael doesn't seem like the type to use poison. As Zagan gets up to leave, Shastiel suddenly asks him to stay. Zagan awkwardly tells her that she should probably ask Nephelia instead, implying that staying alone with her would not be appropriate. Shastiel understands what he means and apologizes. Still, since he doesn't want to wake Nephelia, Zagan simply turns his chair toward the door and continues keeping watch from a distance. Shastiel quietly accepts this. She understands where she stands, and she has no intention of interfering with what Zagan and Nephelia share. More than anything, she just wants them to be happy. The next morning, Shastiel is given a maid uniform identical to Nephelia's, and Zagan tells her she is allowed to stay in the castle, as long as she helps out. Shastiel immediately complains that she has never done housework in her life. Soon after, she meets Valefor, who warns Shastiel not to get too comfortable around Zagan and Nephelia, making it very clear that she doesn't fully trust her. Zagan later explains that Valefor strongly dislikes Templars because of what happened to her father, so Shastiel should try to be understanding. Unfortunately, that doesn't stop Valefor from constantly teasing her. Within the first hour alone, Shastiel screams multiple times thanks to Valefor's harmless but annoying pranks, like eating a frog at her. Over the following days, Shastiel slowly adjusts to life in the castle. Meanwhile, Valefor keeps updating her journal with notes about everything happening around her. She writes that while Shastiel has a nice name, she still doesn't really like her as a person. In Valefor's opinion, Shastiel seems strangely fragile for someone who is supposed to be a skilled Templar. Later, Zagan privately talks with Valefor, and orders her not to prank Shastiel around mealtimes anymore. He also tells her that she is free to stay with him and Nephelia forever if she wants, but she is also free to leave someday, leaving the choice fully in her hands. That night, Valefor has a nightmare about her father. She relives the painful memory of watching someone consume his flesh, and the dream fills her with anger all over again. By the time morning comes, Valefor is nowhere to be found, and the sight of her empty bed sends both Zagan and Nephelia into a panic. Before leaving the castle, Valefor writes one last note in her journal. She writes that she feels happy when asks her to stay with him and Nephelia, and that living in the castle has taught her something she never had, warmth and kindness. She enjoys the gentle care Zagan and Nephelia give her, and for the first time in a long time, she feels safe. But deep down, Valefor knows there is still one problem, that if she chooses to stay here forever, then her revenge for her father's death will slowly disappear, and she isn't ready to let go of that anger yet. So she decides to leave, and in her note, she says she hopes Zagan and Nephelia will understand her choice and wait for her return. Valefor travels alone to the Dark Lord's castle, hoping to find something there that might help with her revenge. But before she can even enter, Raphael appears and blocks her path. The moment Valefor senses him, she notices something strange, like there is dragon energy inside his body. Then, it clocks for her that Raphael is the man who slain her father and ate his flesh. Filled with rage, Valefor attacks him without hesitation, and Raphael calmly prepares to cut her down. But just before his sword can hit her, Zagan suddenly appears and blocks the attack. Thanks to Barbados and his shadow traveling ability, Zagan was able to arrive in time. Valefor is confused, and she doesn't understand why Zagan is still helping her after she ran away. Zagan simply says that he understands how she feels, so there's no need for her to worry. Hearing this, Valefor feels guilty and apologizes, but Raphael watches the interaction with visible surprise. He comments that it's unusual to see a wizard helping someone like this. There, Zagan immediately corrects him, saying that Valefor isn't just some random person, but she is his daughter. With that, Zagan steps forward and Raphael activates his holy sword, and powerful holy flames burst from the blade, instantly damaging Zagan's magic circle. Raphael proudly says that his sword once defeated a Dark Lord before, so he sees no reason it can't do it again. Watching the battle, Valefor asks why Zagan is suddenly taking this fight so seriously, and Zagan replies that he's teaching her an important lesson about revenge. He says that if she truly wants revenge, she shouldn't act recklessly, and needs to break her opponent properly by wearing them down, exhaust them, and force them into desperation. Then Zagan activates a newly improved magic circle and launches his attack, and unlike before, Raphael's holy flames can no longer break through Zagan's defense. After his fight with Shastiel, Zagan learned from his mistakes. He created a new magic circle that constantly absorbs energy from its surroundings to repair itself, making it extremely difficult to destroy. Raphael strikes Zagan 3 times with holy flames, but eventually the flames burn out and disappear. The moment that happens, Zagan switches to offense and blasts Raphael away with his own magic. At first, Zagan assumes the fight is already over, but to his surprise, Raphael slowly stands back up. Only then does Zagan notice Raphael's wounds rapidly healing, and he realizes that the rumors are true, and that Raphael really did gain regeneration after consuming dragon flesh. Zagan tells Valefor to start thinking of a proper punishment for him once the fight is over, but Raphael is confused, not understanding why Valefor hates him so much when they have supposedly never met. Then, Valefor finally says her father's name aloud, Orobas, the wise dragon. The moment she says it, both Zagan and Barbados immediately recognize the name, and Valefor explains how her father was known as a wise and kind dragon, who often helped others in need. One day, a group of Templars came asking for his help, and Orobas went with them without hesitation, but he never returned. After waiting for a week, Valefor went looking for him herself, and what she found left a scar in her forever, seeing that her father was dead, lying on the ground with a holy sword stuck through his neck, while Raphael was there eating his flesh. Since that day, Valefor has hated humans, even though her father himself had always believed in helping them. The moment Raphael realizes Valefor is Orobas's daughter, his expression changes, and he attacks Zagan. Valefor reacts instantly, creating an explosive magic circle and firing it straight at Raphael. But before it can fully hit, Shastiel suddenly appears and blocks Raphael's sword while also protecting everyone from the explosion. Zagan immediately demands answers from Raphael, revealing that he noticed that Raphael's deadly intentions completely disappeared the moment Orobas's name was mentioned, which makes the entire situation suspicious. Before Raphael can answer, Shastiel quickly speaks up, saying that she remembers the mysterious armored figure who secretly contacted her earlier and told her to remember Orobas's name. But now, she realizes that person was probably Raphael. But before anyone can get answers, the ground suddenly shakes violently, and a giant golem bursts out from the cave and begins absorbing energy from the surroundings. Valefor instantly recognizes it as the same golem they previously saw guarding the Dark Lord's castle, and Zagan immediately tries using the same method he once used to control the shadow demon, hoping to stop it, but this time, it does nothing. Then, the golem opens its mouth and fires a huge energy beam straight at them, and everyone jumps out of the way, who freezes like a deer in headlights. But just as the attack is about to hit her, Raphael suddenly rushes in and pushes her to safety, obliterating his left arm in the process. Seeing Valefor nearly die makes Zagan furious, and he unleashes his full power to demolish the golem. Right after, Zagan rushes over to Valefor and Raphael, and seeing that he's on the edge of death, Zagan asks Raphael why he saved Valefor. Weakly, Raphael says that it was his duty, and reveals the truth. He declares that everything Valefor believes is one huge misunderstanding, and that he wasn't responsible for her father's death. But Valefor refuses to believe him, having seen Raphael chomping on her daddy's meat. Hearing that, Raphael asks if she really believes that her father was weak enough to be slain by an ordinary human, and that makes Valefor pause. Raphael then explains that, back then, he asked Orobas for help in fighting an extremely dangerous legendary demon. Valefor is in disbelief, hearing of a demon's existence, and Raphael says that demons have returned in this era, and they are not just myths. Zagan backs him up, saying he has already seen one himself, which is why he has been researching ways to deal with them, even watching Tanjiro in Demon Slayer to get references. Valefor feels heartbroken hearing that her father had to face something so terrifying, but Raphael corrects her, telling her not to think that her father was defeated, as Orobas actually won that battle, and only died because he chose to sacrifice himself. Raphael insists that Valefor should be proud, as the wise dragon gave his life to protect others. Still, Raphael says that if taking his life will truly ease her pain, then he is willing to accept that judgment. However, before she decides anything, he wants her to understand that if wizards and the church keep fighting each other, humanity will never be safe from the demons, which was why Overpowered told Raphael to keep living and inherit his powers by consuming him. But now Raphael admits that his role is almost over, and the future belongs to the next generation, which was why he created the Peace Faction, a group to end the endless conflict between wizards and the church. Barbados points out how ridiculous it sounds coming from a man who has slaughtered countless witches and wizards, and Raphael accepts the criticism, but says that it's also why he believes Chastile can become the symbol of peace between both sides. While they are talking, the golem still continues moving, and Raphael explains that the creature is not made from magic alone, but using demon flesh. Zagan immediately gets ready to use his upgraded spell, and Chastile stands up, ready to support him. Using her holy sword, she charges forward and slices straight through the golem's core with holy flames, which gives an opening for Zagan to attack. But even after its body is destroyed, the leftover magic causes the broken pieces to move again, launching sharp fragments directly at Zagan. But Chastile jumps in and cuts the debris into harmless pieces. Seeing this, Zagan activates his newest magic and lands a powerful attack that finally destroys the golem. Afterward, Zagan comments that his new spell still needs a little more work, and Chastile is amazed by how creative his magic is, while Zagan compliments her strength in return, admitting that having a strong ally is pretty useful. Suddenly, Valefor calls out to them, warning them that Raphael's condition is getting worse. Zagan quickly tries to heal him, but he can tell Raphael's regeneration is failing, and that there is only so much he can do. Before he fades away, Raphael tells Chastile that she is now the true hope for the future, and that his followers will stand behind her. Chastile asks why Raphael used Orobas's name before, and Raphael reveals that Orobas was the true founder of the Peace Faction, and the reason Raphael himself is still alive today. Still skeptical, Zagan asks why Raphael spent so much time witch hunting if he truly wanted peace, and Raphael claims that he never meant to fight anyone, even trying to talk and smile, but ending up always getting attacked first, which forced him to defend himself. To that, Zagan and the others point out that he smiles like he wants to expand some holes with the help of some Diddy oil. Before leaving, Raphael tells Chastile that she should focus on her future while he deals with anyone still trying to attack her. Then, Valefor asks Raphael what he truly thinks of her father, and Raphael answers honestly that Orobas was a magnificent dragon, and fighting beside him was one of the greatest experiences of his life. After Raphael leaves, Zagan asks Valefor if this is what she really wanted, and Valefor admits that after learning the truth, wanting Raphael dead doesn't feel right. Zagan smiles and tells her answer alone is enough. Elsewhere, Clavel meets secretly with his allies, wanting to deal with Chastile personally, as in his mind, she belongs to the church, not to someone like Zagan. At the same time, he knows that slaying her too carelessly would be risky, and if Chastile dies, the holy sword will lose its owner, and finding a new worthy user would be difficult, with anyone unworthy simply would die. As Clavel thinks about this, Raphael suddenly enters the room. Seeing Raphael covered in blood gives Clavel the perfect excuse to act. In his mind, Raphael has already committed a grave sin by working with Zagan. Pretending to help, Clavel coats his hand in poison and offers to heal Raphael's wounds, but Raphael immediately sees through it, and in one clean motion, he cuts off Clavel's poisoned hand. Clavel screams in pain, and Raphael silences him by pinning him to the floor with his foot. He coldly states that nobody is allowed to ruin the future of peace, so because of that, Clavel has to go. The next morning, news of Clavel's death spreads throughout the city, and Chastile realizes that he is probably the one who poisoned her earlier. Knowing how strict Clavel was, Chastile decides it's finally time for her to return to the church and help restore order properly. Before leaving, she talks with Valefor again, and the two make their peace, which makes Chastile cry. Now that she has been accepted by Zagan and the others, Chastile promises to create a future where humans, witches, and wizards can coexist peacefully. Just as she prepares to leave, she hears a familiar voice praising her, and she is shocked to see a dead man walking in the form of Raphael, still alive and is now working as Zagan's butler. Raphael explains that he originally came to receive Valefor's judgment, but instead of punishing him, Valefor asked him to help Zagan and support her as well. As an extra gift, Valefor even made Raphael a new armored arm to replace the one he lost. Watching this bizarre but surprisingly happy household, Chastille realizes she isn't really part of this weird family, but still, Zagan tells her that his castle doors will always remain open for her. As they send her off, Zagan quietly asks Barbados to keep an eye on her and make sure she stays safe, and Nephelia feels a little jealous seeing Zagan care so much about Chastille. She grabs onto his arm to get his attention, and Zagan immediately understands what she wants. Not wanting to disappoint her, he gently pulls Nephelia into a hug and apologizes for leaving her alone the previous night. After things calm down, Balfour writes in her journal about her new life. She writes about how Zagan and Nephelia welcomed her into their home like family, and how Raphael and Chastille also showed her kindness she never expected. Because of that, Balfour wants to slowly repay them by becoming stronger. In the last pages of her journal, she writes about the family's newest members, Raphael, who she once thought munched on her father's meat, but after learning the truth, she realizes he is actually a good man who respects her father deeply. She writes about how Raphael is an amazing cook, but is also annoying by getting in her way whenever she wants to peek at Zagan and Nephelia being lovey-dovey, claiming that Balfour is too young to watch the plot getting thicker. Later, Chastille is coming for a sleepover, so Nephelia takes her to the market to buy ingredients. Then before going home, the girls visit Manuela's shop to try out some new dresses, and Zagan notices a phonograph sitting on the counter. Manuela explains that some alley kids found it and brought it to her, but no one wanted it. Hearing that reminds Zagan of his own childhood, when he lived on the streets and searched through piles of junk for anything valuable to sell. Feeling nostalgic, he decides to buy the phonograph with a bag full of silver coins. Manuela says that is way too much money, but Zagan tells her to use it however she wants. Then, they return to the castle, and seeing Chastille there, Zagan asks how everything is. She says that she is exhausted because after Clavel's death, all of his duties somehow got dumped onto her. Then, Zagan tells Barbados that his crusty existence is not invited, and Balfour even adds that there's not enough food. Barbados complains, but Zagan bonks him on the head and says nobody is allowed to bully his daughter. To lighten the mood, Nephelia announces that she will start making dinner, and Chastille insists on helping, saying she can at least handle simple cooking. But then, a loud scream comes from the kitchen, reaching all the way to the library where Zagan is fixing the phonograph. Barbados walks in and complains that Chastille is so bad at cooking, Gordon Ramsay would get a lobotomy from watching her. In the kitchen, Chastille makes soup, and when she tastes it, she thinks it tastes great. But when Nephelia tastes it, she realizes that Chastille is probably raised in England, where spices is a myth. Trying to save dinner, Nephelia gently tells Chastille to rest as a guest instead, and promises the soup can still be served for breakfast tomorrow. Then, dinner is ready, and Zagan brings out the repaired phonograph and turns it on. Music starts playing, filling the room with a warm and cozy feeling, and Raphael smiles and says he used to dance to music like this a long time ago. Balfour asks what dancing is, so Raphael explains that it is when two people hold hands and move together with the rhythm. Meanwhile, Barbados starts getting drunk, and teases Chastille for being a horrible chef and sleeping with a plushie. Embarrassed, Chastille accuses him of spying on her, and Zagan claims that Barbados always says stupid things when drunk, and Nephelia also reminds Chastille that Barbados was actually the one who saved her after she was poisoned. Chastille apologizes and thanks him, but she starts crying out of embarrassment. Zagan tells Barbados to apologize, but instead, Barbados ignores him and decides to try Chastille's soup, but then it kicks in and he collapses. Nephelia looks completely confused and wonders how that soup somehow ended up becoming part of dinner, and Balfour proudly admits it was actually her idea to prank Barbados. Chastille starts crying, and chaos starts again, but despite all of that, Zagan feels strangely happy, seeing that his home feels alive and warm for once. Later that night, after everyone else goes to sleep, Zagan continues to work on the phonograph, and Nephelia sits beside him. She asks why he bought the phonograph in the first place. Zagan says that he wanted her to enjoy the music. Hearing that, Nephelia happily thanks him, happy to see him looking more relaxed and content than before. For Zagan, he finally has everything he once never had right with him, and the thinks back to when he used to sleep in alleyways, surviving on scraps and relying on the kindness of strangers. Remembering that time, he decides he wants to revisit the alley where he once lived. He asks Nephelia if he can bring the phonograph there tomorrow, and she happily agrees. As the music plays quietly one last time that night, Zagan asks Nephelia if she wants to dance with him. At that exact moment, Balfour wakes up and catches them, but then, Raphael also joins them, and seeing the two not knowing how to dance, he teaches them. And the night ends with joyful dances, joyful noises, and joyful people. The next day, Zagan places the phonograph in the alley where he once lived, and its music fills the streets, while the local children dance happily around it. As the sun begins to set, Zagan and Ophelia dance together beneath the orange sky, quietly wishing this peaceful happiness could last forever. If you watch this anime recap until the end, comment down, "Elf is love, elf is life." That's it for this video. Leave a like if you enjoyed it, and if you want to see more, watch this video on screen.